how do we get to the point where we have these large scale poor outcomes? Is it just a failure of accountability and responsibility?
No.
I should think, because we should know enough not to get there at this stage.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we?
Well, at this point in time, those issues are believed to be fairly prevalent in what you might call the eco sector, the energy company obligation sector, and the G-Biz sector, which are really the sectors in which they're quite installer-led and they're quite measures-based. So they're not by design meant to be that. In reality, they probably are. This is the world that gave us a lot of loft insulation, a lot of cavity fills, a lot of boiler replacements, that kind of thing. So fuel poverty schemes, fuel poverty programs, and trying to change that sector by saying, well, we've got a standard now which says you have to do it differently. So if you like, you're retrofitting an entire sector. That's harder than starting from scratch with a new sector. When you say, well, this doesn't exist yet, we're going to invest in building up a whole new set of companies, whole new set of skills, whole new set of people. No, don't get me wrong, that's hard too. But I don't think it's as hard as trying to change the culture and change the outlook of an entire sector and thousands of people who've been working in it for years, decades, doing things, the way they think they should do them.
And the built environment, whether we like it or not, progresses often through a series of single measures. I hate to use the word, but a series of processes often. There is retrofit, holistic retrofit, deep retrofit. There's a whole number of terms depending on which part of Europe you're in.
Yeah.
But that idea that you have a goal for a building and holistically you move it from A to B and you have a coordinator who's responsible for that. The reality is that a vast majority of the built environment is having incremental improvements the whole time from a whole range of different angles, whether it's maintenance, reactive maintenance, planned maintenance, renovation as opposed to retrofit. There can be a number of different ways buildings progress. And I think that the challenge has always been in that sector where you have companies that specialize in one thing.
Yeah.
Scale is the game, and they just want to bash out cavity insulation or loft insulation or solar panels or whatever perhaps the market is driving at the time. Often as well, there's usually a market force behind a lot of this momentum, isn't there?
Yeah, it's far too complicated. There are lots of factors which lead to those outcomes. But it's partly people not doing their job properly. It's partly value engineering. It's partly the design of the funding schemes in the first place. And it's partly about policing, because in a sector that's got a bad track record, let's face it, parts of our sector, mentioned the Bondfield Review in Each Home Counts, we know it's got a troubled history. And that's why the policing's so important, and it's not been good enough.
Yeah.
It's not been anywhere near good enough. Neither has the consumer redress. I remember when PAS came out, I remember writing a slide and saying, the best thing about PAS 2035 and Each Home Counts means that no one is going to be left hanging again. Whatever the problem with this system is going to get put right, and it hasn't been. There are I very much hope that the problems aren't as widespread as I fear they might be.
And it's part of that. I remember talking to somebody back a while ago about some of these policing and consumer protection mechanisms. In the UK, we have, for listeners that are outside the UK, things like Trustmark, which was an organisation whose, as a result of Each Home Counts, effectively is the body that provides the consumer protection and some of the policies that these big organisations, insulation organisations, ventilation organisations, the component parts of the industry, I suppose. Yeah. But it was an existing organisation that happened to be a vehicle at the time. I wonder if you were writing it from scratch, would the policing mechanism look like a Trustmark if you could do it over again, or you didn't have it there as a vehicle ready to go? Can it ever provide the kind of policing that's needed to really protect consumers? That's the question.
So my personal view on that would be, I think they've done their absolute best in almost impossible circumstances.
Yeah.
They did lack technical expertise, and they've always been resource constrained.
Yeah.
The only way, in my view, that this can be done properly is for a properly funded government agency, because whilst
looks like building control.
Yeah, a lot like that.
Think?
A lot. Well, I don't think it is building control. It looks like but it's similar. It's regulated. It's independent of all interests other than the government's priorities. Because the problem with Trustmark have had is they had a limited amount of funding, and then their business plan, as I understand it to be, was very much, it's the volume of lodgements that are, going to generate income for the organisation, which is going to allow you to employ more people. And so you've got a bit of a paradox there. You've got an organisation there whose job it is to ensure quality outcomes, being funded, if you like, by volume. And that is a difficult tension to manage.
And their only stick is with the umbrella organisations that manage those particular trades, so they're one step removed from policing to some degree.
They are.
Their ability to enforce is only really on the organisations that are members of Trustmark, not on the individuals that are conducting the work. And I think that perhaps is one of the greater challenges, is that you can't respond directly to a complaint in the same way if you can't talk and redress with those particular trades.
That was a theme of the recent Department for Energy Security Net Zero Select Committee that was looking at that Luton programme. As you've got, I think Trustmark would have liked to have finding out for them is quite difficult because they're one step removed from that, and then acting is quite difficult because that has to be, for various complicated reasons that went above my head somewhat, has to be done by certain organisations in a certain way. But when you're the homeowner with the mushrooms growing on the wall, I don't think you care less about any of that. Yeah. So I think you mentioned earlier to me that you're going to be interviewing a few other people this week, and some of those people work for some of those schemes, if you like, they're in the middle between Trustmark and Consumer. You should ask them. I mean, from my perspective, I've been singularly unimpressed by those accreditation schemes, those guarantee agencies. There are exceptions, but not many.